Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another Big Code Hours video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a kind of client server script. Essentially the client's going to be able to request files from the server, and the server is actually going to transfer them onto the client's machine. So it's going to be able to kind of connect to the server, and then it's going to be like this remote connection in Python, and it's going to be able to transfer files. This video idea was suggested by a guy named, I think it's like Femi Fashi 1761, something like that. So thank you, great idea, I like it. So let's get started. So let's make a new file. Let's make a Python file. Let's just save this and call it server.py, and then let's create a new file and save it, and this can be our client.py. So let's start in the server file. So essentially we're going to want to start by importing a couple things. So we're going to import socket. And I noticed some of my videos go a little long, so I'm going to try to go through this one kind of quicker. I'll try to explain things still, but maybe not as quite as depth as I do sometimes. So we're going to import threading, because we're going to want to be threading the connections. Essentially we're going to have a server, and it's going to be pulling, see these images. We got a croc, a monkey, and a penguin. So essentially what's going to happen is we're going to make this server, and then we're going to make it so that the client can connect to the server, and they're going to be able to enter whatever image they want, and it's going to download that onto their machine. So it's going to be kind of cool. And you can do it with anything. You don't have to do it with images. You could do it with any file type if you wanted to. You could do it with EXEs if you wanted to. You could really do anything. So pretty cool. So let's get the TCP IP. That's going to equal our local host. You can type local host, or you can type 127.0.0.1, whatever you want is going to work. We're going to do our TCP port. That can really be anything. 9001. Let's do that for the TCP port. And let's do the buffer size. Again, you can do whatever you want. I think that's essentially the buffer size is what's going to be the amount that's getting sent over. And I'll explain that more, but buffer size, you can kind of make that what you want as well. So let's make a class. Let's call it client thread. And I'm looking at some notes for this because there's a lot of stuff in here. I do not have everything I typed memorized. So we're going to import the thread module as a subclass of this client thread. And you'll see why we do that in a sec here. So let's define our init. Oh, wow. Yeah. Let's just do it like this. It's trying to pull in all the stuff from thread, since thread is a subclass. So just don't hit enter there, because it's going to pull in all the things from thread, and we don't need it to do that. So we're going to do our IP, our port, our socket connection, and our file name, and then our path if we want to enter a path. So that's going to be our initiator, and then we're going to do thread. And the reason we're going to do this, and I'll show you later, is if we do thread right here, then we're calling thread as a subclass. We're actually going to be able to call the thread actions from this client thread. So what you would normally call for thread, we're essentially like overriding the thread module, and we're going to be able to call everything from our client thread. A little bit neater. Saw it on Stack Overflow. Thought it was cool. Thought I would show it to you guys. So let's just go ahead and initiate all our variables. Self.port equals port, and we'll do self.sock equals sock. We're going to do all of these. I hope you like the sound of my keyboard. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but should I just click really loud for you? I'm just kidding. Ignore that. Okay, so self.path equals path. Yeah, that's all we're going to do. So then we're going to do definition. This is going to be actually running our program, right? So pass in self object. What's parameter? I don't even know if it's an object. I don't actually know what it is. And we're going to say F. So this is going to be for our file. So essentially we're going to be opening a file. The file that we're going to be opening, sorry, this is an F string. We're going to be pulling it from our path that we're passing in. So our self.path. And then whatever file name that is going to be entered by the client. So here's a file name. So essentially we're going to create this object through the IP and the port and the connection, and then whatever file name the user enters, we're going to be opening that file, and we're going to be writing that file to their machine. So all true. So essentially we just want this to loop forever, and we're going to say L equals F dot read, and what you can actually do is you can read it by the buffer size. So that's why we're doing it like this. So we're going to read it by the buffer at a time. That way we're not just sending like a ton of data at a time. We're just like sending kind of more like a regimented amount. It's just cleaner. So while the buffer, right, while we still have a buffer going, so while the buffer hasn't emptied yet, then we're going to take the connection and we're going to send, L. So, right, so we're looping through L, we're sending 124 bytes at a time, right, we're sending it to the machine. And then we're going to say, if not L, then we're going to close the file. And then self.sock.close, we're going to close the socket, and then we're going to break. So essentially we're going to transfer all the data over. Make sure I got all that stuff right. Oh yeah, we're going to want to read. Yeah, so we're going to want to read in the buffer at the end there as well. So essentially we're going to be taking the buffer, reading it in. This is kind of like a do-while loop, pretty much, and then, well, kind of ish. And then we're essentially going to keep reading in this buffer, sending it, reading it in. It is kind of like a do-while loop, essentially. And then once this is done, it's going to see that L is empty, no more bytes. It's going to close the file. It's going to close the connection. And at the end, let's see, I got a little, let me copy and paste my print statement over here. I don't need to type that all out. So we got a print statement that's going to say the IP at the port received the file and the file name. That's pretty easy. That's all we're going to be doing for that main client thread. Now we're going to go ahead and actually like establish our connections. So let's do TCP sock. That's going to equal socket dot socket module, and then looks like AF. I think in the last video that I showed you guys, I showed you this and I told you that I had no idea what these meant, but that this was how you connected with socket, and I still have no idea what they mean. So, oh crap, I just like ran something. Okay, let's stop that. We did not mean to do that. So anyway, so socket, right? Yeah, so socket.stream, they probably mean something. Yeah, we're not going to spend time on that. I think it's like the family and then the stream type or something, I guess. I don't even know. If you really cared, you could look it up. So then so in this, I do know what we're doing here. So we're going to go ahead and bind. So the TCP IP and then the TCP port. You do this, you do a bind, and that like makes it run. And then our threads, we're just going to initialize our threads. Then we're doing threads so that way a bunch of clients could send requests to the server without it bogging up. So like 1,000 clients could request files at the same time. The server's going to be able to distribute them. Obviously your machine's going to need to be able to handle that, but it will do it based on our code. Our code won't be a constraint on that. Let's go ahead and print out some fun stuff here. So let's just say like server ready, right? That's kind of cool. Not really, maybe. Let's just do while true. So again, we're just going to run this forever. So essentially our server is never going to stop running. We're going to listen, and honestly, like, I don't think it really matters what number you put for there. I would just put 5. I think that's like typical, but essentially it listens for connections. I don't need to go too much into that. So connection, we're essentially, I know it's underlined here, that's because we're defining the connection. This, let me show you. And if you set it equal, we're going to do a TCP sock. So we're creating our connection, we're binding it to the port and the IP, and then we are accepting connections on our connection with our IP and port that comes in. So right, so whenever someone connects to us, then we're essentially accepting their connection and grabbing their IP and their port, right? We're essentially defining these variables based on their connection. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. I'm gonna grab these print statements from over here. Again, you guys can pause the video if you're wanting to like follow along. So essentially we're just gonna print our IP and our port, establish connection, IP and a port requesting file, and then I'm leaving this end. Essentially every time you do a print in Python, it makes a new line. Essentially putting this end here makes it not do a new line, and I'll show you why we're doing that in a sec. So we're gonna do our connection, and we're gonna say .send, and we're actually gonna add in some file options. So we need to send these as a bytes object, because they need to be sent as bytes over, because it's a little more technical than like, it's not like an email or something, it's really sending the data over, so you need to send it in readable machine code for the system. So we'll say options, and let's do, so we got tux.jpg. Essentially these are just our options for our images. We got croc.jpg, And I did come up with these names, by the way. If you like them, thank you. Please subscribe. JPG for monkey. Probably gonna spell monkey though. Okay, so nice. So we got all those going. We're gonna go ahead and go right here. So we're gonna say the client request file name equals, and then we're gonna do our connection. So essentially we're gonna send these bytes to our client. They're gonna be able to receive these file options, and then they are going to send something back to us to tell us what they, want to choose. So we'll just do 124 bytes for receiving. It's not going to be more than that because they're going to be typing one of these, which is much less bytes than that. We're going to have to decode it, right? Because we're not going to be sending it as a bytes object, so it's going to get sent as a variable. Essentially, you'll see, but if you're not, when you're sending an object, you're gonna, as bytes, you're gonna have to decode it for it not to keep being bytes. We want it to turn back into a string, so that's what that function does. Then we got our print right here, and we're gonna say we're gonna print our client request file name. That is why we're doing the end here, because we're gonna do requesting file, print, and that's essentially gonna print out in this line. All right, that's why we're doing that. Okay, now for the fun stuff. So let's create our new thread, and let's set it equal to our client thread, and what we're going to want to put in here, we're going to do our IP, our port, our connection, our file name, which is going to equal our client file request name, and then we're going to do our path, which is going to equal, for here it's going to equal images. So essentially, this is just wherever you're storing the files. Since we're running the files in the same spot as the images, we can just say images is the file path. Obviously, if you're running this on a real server, you'd want to probably define a path because your images might be in a different folder or something like that. Okay, so here's why we created thread as a subclass. Well, spelling's hard. Okay, new thread.start. So now .start is actually a function of the thread library, not of the client thread, because it's just something we made. But because we put thread as a subclass, this will actually work, and it will come into here, and it will run a new thread on our thread module, which is cool. Then we're gonna append the thread. So this is what you usually do with threads. You say thread.append, and then new thread. Okay, and then I can't take credit for this because I also saw this online, but I guess it's good to put for T in threads. So grab each item in our threads, right? So when we're creating those new threads, we're gonna wanna join them. And as you can see, this is outlined in gray. That's because it thinks it's not gonna run this because it's like, oh, there's a while loop, so it's not gonna run the threads, but it actually will once this while loop closes out. So essentially this is for when your program stops or breaks, it will go ahead and join the threads and close out any threads that have come through if they haven't been closed out already, right? So it's not gonna let any threads just stay open, which is important. Again, there's better ways to probably configure some of this stuff, but I'm trying to make it more like simpler and not too long. All right, so let's go to our client. So for our client, we're gonna go ahead and import socket, and we're also gonna grab, this is our back to our server file. Let's grab these. We'll use the same items here. There's not as much to do on the client side, but there is still some stuff. So let's go ahead and make our socket connection, socket.socket, and then, what was it? Socket.af init, socket.sock stream. Okay, s.connect. So then we're going to go ahead and connect to the TCP IP and the TCP port. Again, so there's lots of options you guys can put in here. You could make these variable and let the user enter what IP they want, what port they want to connect to, like anything. Essentially, we're running the other program, right, on localhost on this port. So we're going to be wanting to run our client on localhost on this port because we're making the connection, right? This is a server that's running, and then this is our little client coming and saying, oh, I want to connect to this server. So let me copy and paste these two lines here. I just don't like typing out the print statements. It's kind of annoying. so we're essentially going to print establish connection to our IP on that port, and then essentially we're going to send we're going to go ahead and send a receiving message, or, well, ask for a receive. So our server, as soon as we're making the connection, is sending, as soon as we make that connection, it is trying to send this, connection.send. And right here, we are receiving that message. So we're receiving the options right here, and then we have to decode it. We have to do the decode. So then we'll say our file request, right? So they told us the options. Now we're going to go ahead and request. Let's say enter file name to, I don't know if file name is one word or not. Receive. Okay, so we're going to enter the file name to receive, and then we're going to go ahead and send that. Our file request, and we're going to say .encode, I think, yeah, because we got to turn it into bytes, because right now it's not bytes, it's a string. It's got to turn into a bytes object to be sent. So essentially now we're sending it, so we're sending this from the server, and now the server waits for the client to respond, and then it grabs that and it uses that as the request file name, and then that's the file name that we're sending, which is cool. So received F, so this is received file. So essentially we're just doing this. We're just doing this to give the file a file name. So whatever file we're doing, we're going to take off the ending, so take off the JPG or whatever ending it is, .exe, whatever you want to do. And we're just going to go ahead and import. We're just going to go ahead and make a timestamp. That way the file wouldn't override another file, right? Because if you're downloading it, you're not going to want to accidentally override a file or something like that. So we're going to give it a unique file name, .split. So essentially we're just grabbing the first, creating a time object and just grabbing the beginning of that time object, which will give us JPEG, which will give us kind of a unique number, right? Because time just keeps going forever, so it's always going to be unique if it's different seconds, I guess. So now we're going to open the file, right? So we have sent our request, and now we are ready to receive. So yeah. So we're going to go ahead and open received. And at first it doesn't make sense because it's like, well, why are we opening the file? We haven't been given it yet, but you'll see we're essentially writing bytes. So this is the file. Oops. So this isn't a file that we have like received. This is a file that we're creating. So we're creating an empty file, and then we're going to be writing bytes to it. So we can print file opened. We could even say file created. That's what we're doing. I guess we're kind of opening, but we're really like creating a file here. And we're going to want to create a while true loop. And then here's where we actually pull in the data. So we're receiving 1024. Oh, okay. Could also say buffer size might be better. They're receiving those bytes. We're going to keep receiving those bytes, and it's going to keep being written. So we're doing with open, so we're opening the file, and we are writing data to it. So, and you'll see that right here, the right part of it. So if not data, so as soon as data stops getting written, we're going to go ahead and close the file. And we're going to print file closed. I don't know, I like periods. Right, makes it better English. Okay. F.write data. So essentially we are opening our file, we're pulling in the data, and then we're writing the data to the file 1024 bytes at a time, and we keep doing that until there's no more data. Then we close the file, and then if we come down here, we can print did I not put a break? We're going to want a break. If we don't break there, the file, that's going to run forever. We don't want that to happen. Successfully downloaded file. I don't know if I spelled all that right, but that's okay. Okay, then we can say s.close. So right, S is our socket connection that we made. So yeah, I mean, I know I went through that quick, but I hope that that makes sense. We're going to go ahead and run it, because of course, right? So let's go ahead and run our server.py. Let's just go ahead and, you know what, actually, so we're in our sample. Okay, cool. So we can just run it like this. Python 3, and then our server. All right, so our server is ready. Let's go ahead and, I don't like that it's down there. Sorry. Let's start that over. I just feel like that's more confusing. Okay, so server's ready. I know it looks funky. I don't know why Visual Studios does that. And then here we're going to say python.client, right? So right, as soon as we run this, it's going to establish a connection. So connection established. All right, obviously I'm using the same machine, but if you were using a different IP on a different network, you probably wouldn't want to be connecting to localhost. You'd probably want to be connecting to the actual IP of that machine, but it works the same way. So essentially this is like another machine that's connecting to it, right? So essentially we established a connection, and then we can pick from our various array of files. So let's do tux.jpg, and if you watch up here, because it's going to show the file getting downloaded. So file name to receive, we're hitting tux.jpg, and we're running it, and we had an epic error, which is always like fun. I'm assuming that did not work. So now we get to figure out what the problem was, and I might cut it and we might get back to that, so just stay with me. I just split the video right there to show you that what I messed up was I forgot to open this as a bytes, to writing bytes to it. So RB, or reading bytes to it, is what we need to have instead. So on your run, say open and then do RB. All right, so let's run it back. We should be good to go now. So as our server is ready, and we're gonna run our client.py and enter the image that we want. Let's do tux.jpg, and I watch up here, it should download that file onto our system. Nice. So requesting file received, and then this created the file, successfully downloaded. And if you look here, that's our little timestamp right there, and then that's our little penguin, right? Pretty cool. And so we could do that again. We can run the client again, and then if we want, we establish a new connection, and we could download the croc.jpg, and it's going to do the same thing, and now it downloaded that croc image. You could do the same with the monkey too if you want, but that's okay. So essentially, yeah. So yeah, you could do that on any file type. It could literally be anything. I'm using images, but it's just writing bytes. So, and you could actually make that a legit server that you could connect to. If you wanted the server to be like global, you could just put it on a server with a global address that is always running and has a port open. I mean, you could literally run this on a server and then be able to download images off that server from anywhere in the world if that server had like just had a public IP. So yeah, so it's pretty cool. It's a fun project. I'll probably be putting it on my GitHub just because it might have been hard to follow with all the stuff that was being typed there. That way you guys can grab it. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any future video ideas, then always hit me up. I'm always down for that. And I appreciate a like and subscribe. That would be awesome. We also hit 100 subscribers, which is really exciting. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. If you're still here, you're probably one of the only people who actually made it to the end, so good job and thanks. Have a good day, guys. Goodbye.